Hello world, Naji Coach here, and today I'm going to be answering some questions from Znai Darius. Alrighty, let's get right to it. Alright, the main thrust of it is regarding the power of Z and how he'd like to get more in touch with it. Okay, here we go. This is him. This leads to my next question. I can't really relate to Z, and I'm wondering what steps I can take to improve my relationship with Z. It's my dominant power, so it should be native, but I feel much more comfortable in Nai and Jai. Any advice? All right. Yes. This is something that actually is a subject I wanted to talk about for a while, which is heroic Z. Because this gets into, again, the subject we talk about a lot about, how the words can be sometimes confusing or misleading when trying to describe powers and so forth, and that's why all various, models that attempt to get an understanding of human qualia using words and descriptions and so forth are destined to fail, because you have to be able to just observe the phenomenon and then make extrapolations and speculations from there, some kind of actual observable data that can be firm, and then thoughts and words which we based on it are going to have some loss of fidelity. That's always how that works, but the loss of fidelity is much less. Well, you start with a fidelity to observable data, and then you try to keep as close to it as you can. This relates to Z in that when you try to describe it, it can often seem a bit cold and as if it isn't part of a heroic pantheon, and it is. So I have a few examples here that I thought might be helpful for you. One is just in general that the dynamics movers use force. That's what they do in order to be able to successfully steer dynamics, and this is vitally necessary for humans to have, otherwise we would not have evolved to have those powers. And it's also important that we have both of them, otherwise both powers would not have evolved as they have. So a big part of that is right action. The understanding that right action is required to make progress in pretty much any field you can think of, any kind of endeavor you can think of, and that Z and G do a lot with that. But Z has some particular things it does that can be more successful at than G. That is designed better for it. And this gets tricky when you start trying to talk about words and so forth. We can use examples of people that we see in media and so forth, and how this might play out. But a big part of that is the ability to make real progress that's going to have some sort of influence on how things are done. We've mentioned a lot about Xi and how that works with the tribe, but there are systems that actually also relate to people, but they can be systems that don't relate to people. But since you mentioned your strong affinity to Nai and Jai, which you do have, it may make it easier to see the value of Z and how to connect with it when it comes to that point of view. So Nai, conceptualizing big picture things, very important to be able to understand what's going on, but then understanding it is not the same as doing something with it. And Z is very efficient at moving a conceptualization forward, both in one's mind's eye and doing something with it in the world. So first thing you can do is to think about the various things that your Nai finds interesting to ponder upon, and then what are you going to do with this information? As soon as you start thinking about what am I going to do with that, that will activate your dynamics mover, in your case, Z. Another part about that is gaining ground. You need to gain ground in order to feel progress as a human in general. Z is the most straightforward with that. Xi also does that, but the progress can be a bit muddy in some ways because of the flex factor. Z is more clear. That's a real advantage it has. It's something I admire greatly about Serbs, is how they have their Nai conceptualization. They can be very high-minded, very broad thinkers, but then what does this mean? What do you do with it? And there's a cleanness to the way Z organizes things. So a clean, clear, distinct edges of what is required to get things done. Another thing is, like when you have your Nai conceptualizations, is even understanding themselves. Like myself, when I go in my Nai, I'm still actually using Xi when I'm in there in order to give it a framework. So already now, although you are nigh heavy, your Z is giving you the framework of what these nigh visions, conceptualizations, and speculations, what they mean and what they can be done with. So already you are doing it, and the fact that you have a framework, but when you're thinking in your nigh, you may not really be noticing the framework that comes along for the ride. All right. Good questions is something that's really good with Z, and you ask some very good questions in this email and other emails, and when Z is doing what it does, it is more efficient this way than G is. G has other considerations that it factors into its progress making, its step taking, but those can be superfluous. Those can be not necessary. In fact, they can get in the way and not be as straightforward as would be ideal in certain circumstances, and Z is the power that has evolved best to do that. So something you can also do in your, say, nigh speculations and also your Zhai, when you're feeling that or thinking those things, is where is this going, and asking the questions to get there, like the questions you've asked me. It's very efficient. In your email, in a short amount of time, just a few short paragraphs, you're gaining a lot of ground, you're making sense of a lot of things, and you're moving towards getting more understanding. Very little loss of motion is done in that. Z has to watch out for sometimes being too blunt, being too forward, too bracing, but in the case of someone who is nigh and Zhai heavy, that's actually not as much of a consideration. It's more activating the Z, and when you do, you're very efficient at making progress. That efficiency is very powerful. It's very wonderful also. For me, I found these questions invigorating. They were very invigorating. They got right to the point. They didn't have any tone to them. It was just, I think I would like to have more knowledge about this, or this. That would be good. That would move things forward. And it feels like we're moving quickly without any drag. All right. Something else that can help you with it is teamwork. You mentioned the military in one email. There's also other things besides that, like, sports teams and all kinds of stuff where you see Z and I, Vi Z and whatnot doing very well. You'll hear Nigh Z actors talk about how they really enjoy the camaraderie of being on set, working with the community. So we tend to emphasize that with Z, but Z also is a dynamics mover, and as a part of that, it steers in ongoing dynamics, and as a part of that, it has allies and opponents and neutral factions. Z and G both actually use that kind of thinking. So getting into some sort of team activity that you actually find the activity itself interesting and rewarding, that will allow you to exercise your Z in a way that will be healthy and productive. So make sure it's an activity that is interesting and elevating for you. Make sure the people that are involved with it actually, meet your criteria for, quality individuals. And then exert yourself. And that may be something, if you're nigh and Zhai heavy, the exerting yourself and the ripples it makes and the force that happens and the impact and how you are going to change dynamics based on your actions, it's important to do that. And you may feel, and I see from your riff, you're sometimes a bit withheld. Knowing that you're doing something that needs to be done can help activate that dynamics mover. So, what you say to people, sometimes Z can feel like, especially if you're not super attached to it, that I don't want to say something unless it's like going forward in some way, that it makes sense, that it's not pointless. So in this case, you would actually have a reason, some sort of team activity to fulfill your role in the team dynamics, in the organizational dynamics. And that will train you on how to articulate, when to articulate, what to articulate, and get a response back from the engagement of whether or not you're doing that well or not, how it can be improved, and so on. Also, recognition. And Z, has to watch out for being overly focused on the gaining of, a hierarchical rank. But that's a very important thing. It's something, for example, I see a lot, sometimes people who live in a bit of a utopian mindset. As an IG, I've known IG like that myself. I've known people in general like that. And you really do have to have hierarchical structure. And there needs to be a way of improving one's status in that, and there needs to be a way of lowering one's status in that, and understanding how that works and getting good at it. So that could be a way to get in touch with it, and it may feel like it's part of, oh, my nai is interested in this, my jai is empathetic to a certain cause or situation or whatever. For example, you're considering medicine. But then when that happens, there is a team effort to get medicine done. That includes the effort of education, being in a classroom. That includes lab work. That includes being part of a team on a certain kind of operation or other kind of thing involving. And so you need to be a strong member of that force. So being a force of one, and then being a part of a group force, and then rising up from that, and knowing what makes the rising and the lowering of one's contribution efforts within it. Healthy competition is another thing that Z is well suited towards, and maybe a good way for you to connect with it. For example, you mentioned you found mixed martial arts interesting. You might want to pursue that. Having done submission grappling way back in the day, I've been doing it for many, many years now, but back when I did it, I appreciated it for a multitude of reasons. One very relevant to this, and actually spoke to my Xi strongly, so I think it would speak to your Z, is fair, firm contestation. It's very rewarding, it's very bracing, it's very invigorating, and it makes you feel that you have, in a positive way, hardened yourself to be a successful vehicle in a given venue, a given trajectory. So you have ideas, you go on the mat, and you try them out, and they either work or they don't work, and then you exert yourself with the Z to try to improve. You ask those who are experts, how does one move forward, and then you take those steps. You take those steps to move forward, and you see the results of them. You also see your limitations. There may be certain moves that are just not going to be very strong for you. You can shore them up so they aren't weaknesses, but they're not going to be strengths. Other things you're talented at, and you can exercise that. And Z is very good at actually gaining strength. Accumulating strength. With your Nai and Jai heaviness, it's important that you, for any hero in general, but a lot of Z alpha may suffer from making sure they include the other powers in the strength gaining. In your case, since you're more Nai and Jai heavy, it is getting more comfortable with the strength gaining, and that is an important thing to do to actually flush out the rest of your peak pathway, the rest of your psyche's needs. What else? Oh, on that is that the fact that you are honoring the way strength works. For example, in say mixed martial arts, you go and do your thing, and you are a part of it as far as like it's affecting you, but you're also affecting the overall aspect of it. One thing I really enjoyed when I used to roll with my friends on the mat is that these were my friends, but they were trying to give me the firmest challenge they could on the mat, within the rules, within being fair, within still being, colleagues. But they were doing me a favor by giving me strong contestation, and then my ability to meet that, exceed that, or if I don't, I'm learning. And I'm only learning through that energetic push-pull exchange. So Z, although it can seem chilly, its advantages and things that it gives to the human species cannot be underestimated. Besides the obvious things that people may think of more naturally, like getting ahead in a career, or being unmoved by sometimes pushbacks, like my feelings are hurt, and Z's like that irrelevant. So those are the ones you think of right away. But actually, there's a lot of, and this is another one, taking care of the human species, taking care of yourself, taking care of your loved ones, that will not happen without worldly strength. Worldly strength is required to make that happen. And so Z is the power that does that. And that may be a good way for you to kind of come in these conduits, is finding ways that make sense to their powers, make sense to your Nai conceptualization, make sense to your empathy, make sense to your sense of bounty, of having a life that is full of bounty for yourself and others around you, and just in general, experiencing the wonderful bounty. But those things will require Z. Every person has Z somewhere in their hierarchy for that reason. All right, what else do we have here? Something else to consider is that Z and I actually very strong this way, we look at their careers, is that there is conceptual progress that is made, and the challenge and contestation goes with that. And there's also practical, even physical applied. And so knowing that you can apply your Z in a multitude of ways will also help you associate with it better. So conceptually, with your nai, your Z will help frame it. It will also give you something to use to conduct experiments. Experiments that make sense, that can be built upon in order to test out your speculations in the world. Your jai, things that you feel empathetic towards. You have strong moral convictions in certain things. Those convictions are awesome, but they're internally held, and in order for them to be felt out in the world and actually to be sheltered, in order to have a place in the world, something, either Ji or Z, will need to do that. In the case of yourself, Jai always goes with Z. Z is needed in order to make that place. That place that will be good for your Jai will not make itself. It'll have to be made by your Z. And then also the V, bountifulness. What do you consider to be bountiful? What is a good environment to be in, where the sights and the sounds and just the overall ambiance is good for you, is good for those things that you care about? Again, a place for that will need to be made, and Z is excellent at doing that, at both just building things in general, and then also constructing boundaries that have to be respected, boundaries that actually allow for progress to be made and lack of progress to be pushed off. Let's see, mentioned already, but I'll kind of say here, being a humane advocate or protector in like the medical field, that would be a very strong element. Obviously, you have the thinking of things high level with your nai. You're in the moment, maybe an operation or something, or in a lab with your V. You're feeling this is a good thing to do with your life. You are being a worthy, noble person. This is a virtuous pursuit with your jai. But there's a battle. There's a battle against your ignorance. You have ignorance, everyone does, in the field they want to go in, and you have to take that ignorance away. You have to fight it. Z is very good at battling things that need to be battled. It doesn't have to be warlike or so forth, but it's simply something that is not as good as it could be, and it's going to stay there unless it is ridden over, built over, pushed away, even submitted, even forced to acknowledge it does not have a place in this venue. Z does that. All right. Understanding power dynamics. Since you said you have an interest, in some people that are very kind of strong individuals, it means you have an interest in how power dynamics work. And power dynamics are very important because there's lots of things that relate to the other 7 powers, that there will be power dynamics and how that work, and you have an innate savviness to it. Being nai and jai heavy, you might also be more inclined to being a bit of a watcher. That's okay. But you know that when you watch, you have an ability to observe power dynamics easier than those that do not have Z as a momentum power. So that's a big thing that you can do. It can be helpful for your own development. You can understand how it affects your peak pathway, but it's also very helpful for other people. Other people don't have that talent. So to have a person like that on the team of life, so to speak, is really cannot be done without. It's invaluable because for a lot of people, like myself, that's not something. I tend to think of power dynamics I'm strong at that, but it's very difficult for me to separate that from interpersonal dynamics. And when I do separate it, I tend to do so in a defensive capacity, using my Zai. To be able in a proactive capacity to separate those things, to look at power dynamics in a very clear, untoned way, is a special kind of wisdom. It's a wisdom that you can cultivate easier than others can, and you can share it with other people, and that'll be really, really helpful for them because they can't do that as well themselves. And even if they can do it somewhat as well in like just a technical capacity, like sometimes I can maybe think on certain power dynamics better than a Zenai could in certain areas that I have specialties or whatever, but I can't do it as cleanly. Being a Ji Mojo, Ji Momentum, there's a cleanness to the way it works that actually is very challenging for me. And if I do it, and I can do that to some degree sometimes well, using my Zai and Ji in combination, it's not as natural. It's not as easy. It's not as comfortable. For example, the comfort with which you laid out these questions, I would find that a little difficult to do. Unless I'd known someone for a while and we had gotten to where you just kind of go back and forth, with emails or whatnot. But to go right into that feels a little odd. In fact, I can't even sell it as well as you can because I have Ji, and therefore I tend to be toned, which makes it different, or I can neuter it with my Zai. I can untone it. But to actually just be be untoned naturally, that's a special gift on its own. All right, scoring. That's another thing. Again, Z has to watch out that doesn't get too preoccupied with scoring for scoring's sake. But in your case, I think that'll be less likely, seeing as you're more Nai and Jai heavy. For you, it is the fact that Nai and Jai can resist scoring. But scoring is very important. Nexi, my muse goddess with her Z, it comes up later in my peak pathway and we discuss things, but at some point, she always informs their Z that there is a score to what I'm doing. It relates to scores of other people doing other related things, and that I could improve that score, and that I should. And that has helped me throughout the years greatly. So that's something that is actually major momentum for you, is understanding how scoring works and how scoring for things that are important, can't do it for everything, but for things that are important, it is vital. You can't actually move forward without it. I know a lot of people, a lot of Naiji, for example, a lot of romantics, really a lot of people don't have Z, or even don't have Z momentum. They can find scoring to be like, oh, can't we all just have the same score? No, that's not how life works. That it never has been, never will be. So no, there are scores to pretty much anything you can do, especially with your Z and Nai. You can look at it and break down how it works, how you progress, who's where, who's moving that way, how fast, and where you fit into the mix, how you could actually improve that, and what you have to watch out for so you do not lose your momentum, wind in your sails. All right. Let's see here. So I think I kind of addressed that initially, and then you can ask me more questions about that. Oh, there's a few more here I jotted down. Building. I kind of mentioned it maybe briefly here, but Z, it's not just contestation or like submitting, because that can seem sort of rough or aggressive. But Z, actually, one of the huge things about it is its ability to build. It's a builder power. In fact, we sometimes talk about the Z alpha having like builder hands. And that ability to build things, I mean, that's the reason why you see a lot of stuff in the world where it is. I mean, there's no mistake that Z and I are so strong in politics, CEOs. I mean, pretty much anything where you have to, campaigns of all kinds, mainstream or alternative, you have to build something. Things don't just come into the world the way humans would best like them on their own. You have to exert life force. Oh, that's a big one. Z, both Z and G in their own ways, but Z in just a fresh, untoned, vibrant, vital way, it has life force to spend to make things happen, to build things. In fact, that's what I focus on, because generally the contestation and the scoring and things of that nature necessary to sometimes submit various forces that are against you, they will come up on their own when you try to build something worthy. Conceptualize something that's worthy to build, and then start building it out, and then you'll see things you need to prove in yourself, things you need to change in the world, things that you need to get closer to you, things you need to push away. That'll all become evident to your Z as you try to build something worthy. And that building can be a physical building, it can be a skill set in yourself, such as medicine or mixed martial arts. It can be a community. Again, we tend to think of G that way, but there are a lot of community organizers. Actually, we have more community organizers that are Zenai in the database by far than Genai. So again, community building, really building of anything you can think of. In fact, I'm having a hard time thinking of any form of building, be it physical or metaphysical, that Z cannot do an excellent job with. Especially when it's paired with Nai, you can get quite creative with what counts as building something. What else? Kind of the opposite of it, but also very important, deconstructing. That's very helpful. There are quite a few Zenai thinkers like Christopher Hitchens. There's a lot of them that I just, Neil deGrasse Tyson, the list goes on and on. They're able to break down what's happening. Now, one advantage G has is it can sometimes be like, I'm your friend and I'm a friend telling you this. Or I'm not your friend and I'm deconstructing you from an unfriendly. But Z skips the friendly, unfriendly dichotomy. It goes right to what makes this what it is, and breaking it down into steps that can make sense to you. But a great gift that you have is that if you can break it down for you, often Zenai can turn that around. Sargon of Akkad, there's a lot of them, and their mental clarity on subjects is really wonderful. Even subjects that I myself already know a good amount about, that I even have well thought out opinions on, I still appreciate that because it's done with a Nai to the Z, which I don't have, and it can really wrap its head around complicated things and then break them down into steps, into boxes, into categories, things that actually anyone can pick up. Anyone can pick up, and it's like a tool. Once Z is broken or deconstructed something, anyone else generally can come in and do that. G tends to be, there's a lot more to do with the relationship of the recipient of the giving, whereas Z, it's more neutral in that regard, and a lot of times that can be better. It does not change the tonal dynamics by introducing some well thought out steps for building something up, or taking something that's already built up and explaining to someone who may not understand why that is the way that it is. It didn't just get there, it got there in a certain way. Like I said, I'm strong at that, but that's something that's taken me many years to get at, and I tend to go through my Nye fantasy world, then my G with my spirit guides and real life friends and so forth, and down the road I can then lay it out into broken down kinds of steps, but that takes years sometimes for me to do. It's not something that is readily there for me, and that's a great gift that can be for yourself and anyone that happens to be not just your friend, but really able to partake in any work you've done. Once you break it down, pretty much you can just ship it around the world and it's good to go. That's really cool. Clear explanation, kind of touched on that, but I'll just add the one last thing, that the clarity is one thing that's really gained when you lose the tonal. The tonal makes it more personal, but it actually also reduces clarity. Z doesn't have the tonal, so it's not as personal, obviously, but the clarity gets a nice bonus. All right. So you go on here. So he has a series of questions here. These are probably answered a bit quicker. Kind of just going the theme of asking good questions. So you ask some good questions here, and I'll try to fire back. All right. And my Nye way of delivering, I hope you can get along with that. I do try to get to the point and stay on topic, but sometimes I tend to have a bit of a friendly or unfriendly energy with it. In this case, obviously, it's friendly. That's just part of the package. It's very hard for me to actually take that out. And then not letting my Nye, since it's source, not tandem, sort of like, I guess, speculation. Like, ooh, let's just go on the speculation. I have to like stay on topic. So Z gives you an advantage that way in two ways. One, that it is untoned, it's impersonal, but also for you, it is your major momentum. So your Nye is more in service of that. The Nye doesn't necessarily take it off and overrun it once the Z has been engaged in a way that you feel good about, and so you're not doubting yourself. So your confident Z will be able to have a subservient Nye in the way it operates. And obviously, we need both. We need all the specialties. Okay, so he says, several years ago, I wished to train in MMA, but never got around to it. He sees that many samples of Xenai do mixed martial arts, and he admires Fedor Emelianenko, and can identify with my corner to the term hard men. He relates to it a lot. And you've said this more than once, so I wanted to address it. There is a thing such as hard man or hard person, and there are a lot of Xenai that would fit that description. However, I would want you to see it as larger than that, because hard can seem focused on forcefulness that is unfeeling, and for yourself to be unfeeling. And that can come up, and Z can be very strong at that. And Xenai, obviously, from the demographics we've seen, they excel in all kinds of things like that. But it's bigger than that. And so the word I'd go for, and all this term doesn't have a great connotation either, but it should, if it was done right. It's about being done wrong that's the issue, and that is a strong man or strong person. So just like, may this make sense to you, like hard man is usually associated more locally. It's a smaller scale concept. For example, there are a lot of leaders in the world that are considered strong men or strong women. They wouldn't be called hard, or maybe they could be, and often this is common. They may be considered a hard person earlier in their career. And it's not like they got soft when they got older. No, it's more like they got upgraded from hard to strong, because strong person is more encompassing. It includes being hard, but also strong just means you can not just do things without feeling remorse, that you can take things without feeling it so much. It's more, you can build. You have the strength to follow through. You can make things happen. You're a doer. You're a doer, you're a shot caller, you're a person that makes the world be the way you think it should be. And I'd even say that's under even larger heading of being like a great man or a great person. Actually, we taught this, is Z9, I think we used to think that maybe the 9G had the widest career range and world records, but I would say no. With the new data, we understand that the Z9 actually has, we said, the widest career range, but as a part of that, a focus on being great, a focus on what are the achievements that other humans have been able to do, what are the achievements that I've been able to do earlier in my life trajectory. I want to exceed that, and once I do that, I want to exceed that, and so on with that, wonderful thirst for challenge. So sometimes people think that being a hard man or a strong man or a great man means that you don't care. And that's something to watch out for, because Z can be, if it's not watched out for, so impersonal it can become callous. But in a positive way, it means no, you are hard enough to not let a rough, that's why hard man tends to be in areas that are just hard. So it's saying that you will not be overwhelmed by rough things. A strong man says you will actually get things happen. Your will have sway. And a great person means that you actually understand how to push yourself and others through the difficult things that are required to achieve greatness. Because that will not happen on its own. There will have to be a great amount of force exerted in the world, and on one's personal efforts will have to be given a firm, consistent pressure in order to get that done, in order to make the sacrifices. And then your Jai is in there to balance that, to make sure those sacrifices aren't too much, because then that's when the negative connotations of that kind of thing, hard, strong, great, which is that you don't care about anyone else in that pursuit. And that does not have to be it at all. In fact, truly being hard is not like being unfeeling, because actually that's a defensive mechanism. It shows weakness. A truly hard person means that you know what you care about, you know what's important to you, you know what you want to do with your life and so on, and you pursue that, and when things that would knock other people over hit you, you don't get knocked over. But you're not just kind of like being. That's important. You're going forward and upward to higher ground, and in that pursuit, when things try to push you off that path, they will find out you're hard. When you go up that hill, and people are like, oh, this next level of the hill, you've got to do this. You've got to lift this kind of psychological weight. You've got to lift this certain amount of academics. And you're like, chicka, 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 chicka then. I'm strong. I'm strong. People say like, oh, that's going to cost a lot. You'll need to have a lot of what? A lot of personal strength? I have a lot of personal strength. And the same thing with the greatness. All right. Let's see here. Pertaining to your new attitudes towards relationships, does this mean that the emoji relationships hierarchy has changed? Before, the ideal inspirational trio for Zenai was Zaini, Nizai, Zai, V. Has this changed at all for the Mojos? No, it hasn't. It's just some refinements, two refinements. One is that if you look at them in pyramids, you have an inspirational pyramid, you have an augmentational, and then you have a suppression. And there's also in between composition and compensation. With the inspiration for you, you're right, it is Zaini at the top, and at the base it is Zai V and Nizai. That pyramid is the most significant pyramid. So that hasn't changed. The second one is augmentation, which would be Zenai for you, followed up by Zivi, Nai, Z at the bases. And then similarly, correlation to the suppression. So as far as a pyramid, that still lines up. But one thing we have noticed, if you go within the pyramids and you actually just go to single storylines, there's a nuance to it, which is that the top, there's like a single storyline from each of those that is the most predominant. So for Zenai, that's Zenai with Zaini. We see that the most. And the pyramid that you just mentioned there, that pyramid, inspirational pyramid, is seen the most. But if you just talk about single storylines of relationships, it goes Zenai with Zaini, and the next one is Zenai to Zenai. And actually, suppression. You're seeing, I don't have as much data with the Xeni, but you will see, for example, there are some, like you see with Nizi and different things, where they actually go with Xi-V or things of that nature. And what my takeaway from this is that there is a channel hierarchy that is extremely important. And if you can get the channel hierarchy and the 4 powers you're missing with the Xi, that would give you the ideal inspirational. But it seems from what we've seen from the data that humans, if they cannot get that, the one that seems to be the easier fit for them is to keep the channel hierarchy. Xeni with Xeni. Don't have the same inspirational powers. There's redundancy of the powers you have and overlap in areas of authority, but it does follow logic-based, interpretive, literal, values-based. And that channel hierarchy seems to be very important. To the point that the third most common thing I would say sometimes is actually suppression relationships that mirror inspiration. So for you, that's Xeni with Xi. We saw, for example, Donald Trump. He was married, I think, to a Xi for a while. And I'm thinking that's probably not as rare as you might know right now. I think there might too, because in other alchemies, we see the same thing playing out. Where, like for Nai-Ji, most common is Nai-Ji with Ni-Ji. Next most common is Nai-Ji with Nai-Ji. And then after that, it's Nai-Ji with Vi-Ji, which does have a lot of similarities on a course level with the Ni-Ji. All right. So no, things have not changed there, but they have been refined to separate between the overall pyramids of inspiration and augmentation and whatnot with the individual couplings within it. And then also is that I want to be understanding for those people who have actually had those kind of relationships and appear to be quite successful. There's quite a lot of double Xenis, double Nai-Ji, double whatever that seem to do well. Now, obviously they're lacking 4 conscious powers, and that's an issue, and they're going to have to deal with that, making it up in another way, and the fact the main signal they're getting is actually the same mojo they are. So there are things to deal with there, and I believe that in a perfect neutral world, obviously you're getting the channel hierarchy with your ideal inspirational, plus you're getting the 4 powers you don't have, plus you're getting 0 overlap in psychic priorities. That's awesome, but we don't live in a neutral world, so there is a combination between the 2 people and the world. There's like 3 elements there. And so there does seem to be a significant amount of success with same mojo couples projecting their other into some sort of campaign or activity in the world or lifestyle that is dominant, is prevalent, and they have to deal with that. Now, I know you're thinking, I as well, that once you go with the ideal inspirational, yes and no. 2 things on that. One, I just mentioned, is that there is the thing that the world may make it difficult. For example, double Xeni couples, you see a lot of that in areas where stuff is rough. Areas that are rough in life, time periods that are rough, you'll see a lot of double directives. And I think it's actually correlation double adaptives, because when shit gets gnarly, the challenge level, the operational challenge level is lower, I believe, with same mojos. Obviously, you're not getting the other 4 powers, and that's a big issue that has to be dealt with. But if the world's kind of like knocking you about and you need to grab someone who's just going to kind of run and gun with you, it's easier for me to run and gun with another Nai-Ji. With a Ni-Ji, I actually have to account for a non-directive way of doing things, although that actually makes me stronger, and the challenge, if I can meet it, grows me even more. But sometimes that degree of growth requires learning curves and expenditures of energy that the environment might be too inclement to deal with. And this brings up another element, which is that the idea of marriage that is in many cultures kind of brings in that whatever relationship you have has to be the one that's going to last forever. Because a trend that I think we're seeing, and even more data on this, I'll be studying with Jailene in the months and years to come, but basically is how these things can trend. For example, there does seem to be something to sometimes people starting out with, it doesn't always go like this, but there's something here. They'll sometimes go with a partner that is a compensatory partner. in order compensatory or suppression because it actually fits easier in the situation they're in. Once they kind of grow a bit and develop their choreography and their personal abilities, then there's the issue that you don't have that channel hierarchy. So the next upgrade seems to be you need that channel hierarchy. Xeni to Xeni, for example, you get the channel hierarchy and there's a lot of ease in communication and you don't have to expand yourself so far into, outside your comfort zone. You can stay more easily in your comfort zone. But once you build up stronger and stronger and stronger from that, then you don't need as much of a comfort zone. And so the idea of having the person be so much similar to you is not as helpful. Maybe when you are not as strong and maybe feeling that you can't be all the Xeni a story needs to be, you need someone you can talk to easier or someone who can bolster your Xeni-ness. But once you actually are able to basically do all the Xeni you need to be doing in your particular storyline yourself, then the extra Xeni, that's where the redundancy and issues come in. And even before then, like I said, the overlap in areas of authority. But in certain situations or times in one's life, that can be maybe less of an issue than how inclement the environment it is and how much you need someone who just gets it. Just gets it. Like Naiji and Nijai complete the Naiji. But actually when things make them wonderful is they appreciate you like no other mojo can, but they actually don't get it. And that's why you're magical and you'll never stop being magical because a Xeni is never going to become a Xeni. But earlier on, the same mojo gets it. They get it, they get your native language. But that comes with a cost, as we mentioned. All right, what else we got here? Also notice that you've removed Hitler from the database. Yeah, not enough media. Is it possible he could be a Xeni? On that, this is not even a soft read. This is not even a soft read. This is speculation. It's a very heavily laden case, and there's very limited media to work with. But if you're just asking me on speculations based on statistical probability, yeah, I would say probably Xeni. Especially once I realized how incredibly hypnotic the Xeni can be, the sway they can have over people with their bardic abilities, their power of monologuing, their power of being ideologues. So several things like that, Hitler, I think, could definitely be a Xeni, although I'm no way making a claim there, not even soft. But yes, your speculation, I think, has merit. In fact, Einstein, also, I'm way off from ever being able to call that case, but again, with recent things, I think there's a chance he might be a Xeni too. But this is all speculation, not even soft yet. Okay, let's see. Further, do your concepts of momentum and modulation still apply? If, as you say, I'm a Xeni with heavy 9 Jai, then isn't that Jai curbing my energy? Or am I doing Jai in a way that fits my peak pathway? Yes. So, as far as mental modulation, yes, they do still apply. In fact, they're stronger than ever because the data is cleaner, and that's why I was able to tell the difference between Xeni and Nijai, because they both have Z and Jai. I was able to see that, but my greater understanding of momentum modulation from good data corrected mistakes I had and reaffirmed how important it is to note the physiological cues that separate, for example, your Jai maneuvers, your cues, versus a Jai mojo that has it as momentum. So yeah, actually that is still in place and stronger than ever. As far as the term being Nai heavy, you can actually have too much Nai. So even if you have momentum power, you can have too much. So when I say you are heavy on Nai, that's not bad. If you were over Nai, I tend to use that term, heavy versus over. You're over momentum, you're over Nai'd. Or Nai'd up is another term we'll use. So same thing with Jai. So just because it's modulation, modulation is a good thing, you need it, and being heavy on a modulation power is not bad. Several of the people that are Naiji in our community are Zai heavy. It's quite common actually. But as long as they actually know what they actually are, and that fits within their overall peak pathway, that can be a wonderful riff to have. So there's nothing wrong with actually being heavy on any of your powers as long as it doesn't overwhelm your peak pathway. That's the critical thing. But then no, actually myself, Nye and Jai heavy Z-Nye seem to be a lot of my favorite Z-Nye actually are of that riff. Not that being my friend's the most important thing, but point is that the different riffs, as long as they are healthy, it's good to have a wide variety of Z-Nye riffs out there. We need all the different varieties to have Z-Nye do what they need to do for the species. So yes, I think you've come a long way since we first met, and you're still Nye and Jai heavy, but in a way that actually seems much more self-aware, purposeful, and healthy. So yeah, being Nye and Jai heavy, not a problem at all, and doesn't affect momentum modulation. Like with your Jai, it's strong. You have a lot of development. I can hear the heaviness in your voice. There is a restraint you have, a smoothness, a calmness. Those are all wonderful attributes that your Jai gives you. But I don't think they're overwhelming your peak pathway. And then physiologically, it's not moving up into your cheeks. So the fact that you have a lot of Jai and it's strong is not changing its hierarchy in your peak pathway. All right, let's see. All right. Essentially, I'm wondering how much this shifts the understanding of samples as far as beliefs in pod layer generally. No, actually, the beliefs I've had are stronger based on the updating. They play off each other. The data has made the belief stronger, and actually my beliefs, such as the 5 years of mojo reading, the need to purify, the need to have the quasi-state of detached interest, you know what I mean? All those kinds of things made reading the data better. So the basic philosophical principle of pod layer make for, I believe, the best truth seeker making ideology that has ever been put forward. And because of that, it's making for the best mojo reading. But then it turns around, the mojo reading gives the best understanding of, empirical observation of samples, and then that comes back and validates or corrects the philosophies. So far, the philosophies haven't been in general principles have been only strengthened. What has changed is my conceptualization of certain things. For example, I had misunderstandings and biases and ego things and a whole bunch of stuff as far as certain samples that were Z-Nye. For example, a lot of these Z-Nye that have Nye and Jai heavy riffs, I think they're spiffy, and so much did I think so that I attempted to own them, which was a mistake. But that mistake was borne out in two ways. The philosophy of pod layer is keep pursuing the data, the physiological cues, and allow that to teach you and be open to being taught by the data. In turn, the skill set in the data got better, and then that was corrected. So both the approach that pod layer uses philosophically made for better data, and the better data has improved the philosophy. But the 16 quality categories, 32 gender mojos, those have not changed or may feel any different. In fact, now that I know you're a Z-Nye, I feel better because there was uneasiness in certain ones, like Muhammad Ali. His face always bothered me, despite the fact he did certain maneuvers I associate with Nye G, and it'd be really cool to have Muhammad Ali be in the quality category I am. But there was an uneasiness, and that uneasiness kept nagging at me. And my philosophy, pod layer, says when you have that nagging, you must investigate. Do not become complacent. Do not accept that uneasiness. Keep feeling at it, and eventually you'll buff it away by finding data that explains, oh, Muhammad Ali is like this kind of Naiji, and you're like, oh, okay, now his broad face isn't a problem. It didn't go that way, it went the other way, which was like, oh, actually there's Z-Nye that do what he's doing. That's a thing. Oh, okay, and now the uneasiness has dissipated. And so, yeah, both philosophically and as far as methodology, they have converged to keep reducing uneasiness. And I will continue to pursue it. It's one of the things I like about the new grading of the media I'm doing. I can keep going through, and even samples that are like, C grade and D grade samples, I can keep revisiting them and be like, why are they D grade? I believe the vast majority that are in there now are D grade because they're simply difficult samples. But they are uneasy because they're challenging. I'll keep revisiting them. And then I will either get more okay with it, being like, oh, that's just a Vaiji with a really big head. Some Vaiji have big heads. Or that's something else, and now it makes sense. But I will keep pursuing that uneasiness. I like the uneasiness. I never want to get to a state where I lack the uneasiness. All I'm going to do is keep looking around in my psyche and in the data and seeing where is there any uneasiness, where do I feel any hiccups, and I'll just keep learning. That's what you do. All right. What else here? Recently I became aware of Auburn's group, and I'm wondering if you'll address their blatant plagiarism of their theory. I think we actually addressed that back in the day, back when Demas was kind of doing that kind of stuff, and I'm fine with it because this kind of gets into Z. I feel very strong in our position. As a Xena, I think you appreciate the strategy here. This game is basically who can figure out the Rosetta Stone. That has to be done. And the only way to do that is visually. And then the only way to make that work is that if the answers are correct, more people will be able to do it. Which is why there's no point in me keeping Muhammad Ali once I realized he was a Xenite. It's stupid. First of all, just from a moral standpoint, it's dumb to actually do that because I'm lying to myself. But in a public way, for this actually to work, people need to be to come in and go, oh, that looks like a Xenite. I get it. So it has to be universal. It has to be able to be transferred as a knowledge to other people. So Auburn, he doesn't have that. He's copying an idea and then he's trying to embellish it or make it more palatable to people. That's inherently a problem. You can't make science more palatable. It is what it is, and then you pursue it. So he's basically just going to always be taking second helpings, and he needs to be purifying himself. And he can't purify himself because he's not doing a methodology that actually would increase the skill set he needs in order to do so. Plus, he needs to create a culture in his community, in his ideology, and in his campaign where it's understand that one must obey the data. And the data is clear and it can be learned and one's knowledge can get better. Otherwise, it's a consensus. You can dress it up as science, but basically it's consensus. And consensus is never going to go anywhere. Even maybe popular for a short period of time. Yeah, but that's a popularity thing and eventually reach a ceiling and then pop and then, dissipate. For example, when he dies, who cares? I'm not trying to be a dick or anything, but it doesn't matter unless the work matters. Unless the work is real, unless the science is real, then in the way I think very high level, in the future, highest stakes and so forth, I've looked at what other people are doing. Unless you're doing what we're doing and getting better and better all the time, it's not something that's ever going to be picked up in generations to come. It's not something that a computer, which is very important to me, is going to be able to pick up, like Ben's working on stuff and Mitchell and so forth, facial recognition. That's not going to be possible. So it's a lot of mental masturbation, which is fine for some people. They want to go do that, but myself, it's pointless. And I feel no threat because if anyone sees what they're doing, just being honest, if they're impressed by what is being done there, then I couldn't care less. I don't need people that foolish. And then if they actually do find out and go, oh, so this is a new way of doing things, and they actually go and look at who's doing something in that field, the progress we're making and the practices we use and the standards we hold ourselves to is just higher. Because, your Z will appreciate this, it needs to be effective. It has to be effective and it has to be universal. And if it doesn't have those two things, which it won't unless it's based on real data with a real skill set for observing and understanding and cataloging said data. So honestly, if it becomes relevant, people ask me a question or something, I will address it, but I don't really consider it to be a thing. I try to actually get the typology community to engage with me, even to compete with me, even to have contestation. That could be fun, it could be motivating for all of us. But they're not really interested in doing that. And as far as I can tell, Auburn is just one of the many typology people that are like this. I'm going to try to find, when I re-engage the typology community, the few people that are willing to do it. And I'm making a list in my head of what are some requirements of character that you need to do this kind of work. Because that's the only thing that's really going to get anything done. Data, methodology for that data collection and understanding, and then training the right kind of people who have the intellect and the interest to actually learn what's really going on. As far as I can tell, every typology model that I've seen so far, and I'm not trying to be unfriendly because I'm going to be more friendly with them going forward, but I'm going to be friendly to those who are seekers. And I'm going to make like a little litmus test for what that is. I haven't decided yet, but I'm going to do that because otherwise it really just strikes me as pseudoscience astrology. It's what it is. And I've yet to see anyone, including Auburn, and I'm not trying to talk smack, I'm just saying what I see. They don't have the character for it. They just don't. They do not conduct themselves in a way that shows that the most important thing to them above all else is getting the right answers. then train themselves to be able to get better and better answers, and then to be able to transfer that knowledge to others. It's a lot of people who want to sound smart and have other people tell them they're smart and basically have a little party about, ooh, I'm an INTP, I'm this or that, or whatever language they're using. It's just basically like a party. And parties are fun for a while, but then they just die off. They don't really mean anything. For me, meaning means something to me. I want to do a real solid by myself, by my spirits, and by humanity now and in the future. That's the drive. If anything, if they're doing anything that's even remotely like what we're doing, I'm just happy that some people out there, is he doing like visual stuff, visual recognition stuff? Maybe that's what he's doing. At least that's actually changing the dialogue. I'm just happy they're changing the dialogue. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be worried if there's something they could steal from us. But that's one brilliant thing about my strategy. Everything I'm doing is open. Anyone who wants to grab this is more than welcome to do it. You can use my list for whatever things they're going to do. Obviously, I will correct them if they use that data for nefarious ends. I'll have to say something then. But otherwise, I just treat it as a differing point of view in a scientific contest of who has the right answers. And I feel very confident that the answers that we're getting and how we're getting them are just light years ahead. In fact, we're not really on the same scale, because when I've seen, they don't have, like I said, the character to actually make progress. They tend to kind of just make something and then get people to agree with it and then kind of talk with them and try to foster that community. In fact, that's something that's been difficult for me over the years, but I have to resist that urge to do that because it doesn't help the work. So that's kind of my take on that. So I don't really have any ill will towards it. Although I know when I re-engage the typology community, I'm sure the various typology vendors who will become a topic to talk about, and then I will give my views when it comes up. But right there, it's boring. He's boring. The work is boring. It's not really going anywhere. It's just telling people things they want to hear, playing on people's insecurities. You just kind of listen to something they say in a comment, and you're like, oh, they want to be this, they want to be that. They conceptualize themselves like that, and then you give it to them. And it's kind of like really like a sugar pill dope dealer. And, hey, rock on, do your thing. As long as it doesn't get in my way, but it really can't. They're kind of doing their own thing to a group of people that I think by and large don't really have, I don't want to be too dismissive here, but they don't have what Podlay requires. It's going to take some very intelligent, very dedicated people who are able to put their ego on the side and allow the data to be what it is. Very few people are really that degree of truth seekers. So, in fact, when I go out to engage the world some more, I'll go to typology some, but I'm mainly going to be going around to anyone who's talking about qualia or ideology, what they believe in, and they really show a true earnestness and wanting to understand things. Like the Auburn thing, I try to click on, I just typed in Auburn typology to see what I would get, just see I didn't find anything. What I did see was just tons of typology crap. And there's just tons of people saying this about INTP and this about ENFJ and blah, blah, and it's all meaningless. Other than it's kind of convincing foolish people that they're getting something when they're not, and convincing most other people who are spectating it that it's a pseudoscience. I guess that's my take on that. So, all right. Oh, and you asked me a question about someone. I'll email for that one. All right. So that's kind of my thoughts on your questions. And if you have any more stuff, let me know. Anyone else has any thoughts, any questions, throw them my way, and I'll do what I can to answer them. All right. Bye-bye.